So just few words before Christine's speech about Tuesday Connect. So this is, as I mentioned, a new opportunity to meet all together. So this meeting is for all JAMRAI partners and also external stakeholders. So it's an opportunity for us to show our work to all of you, because you are all working in different work packages on specific tasks, and you may not be aware of what is happening in the rest of the JAMRAI. So this Tuesday Connect meeting main intention is to allow you to have a broader perspective on what we are doing. And it's also an opportunity for stakeholders to present their work to the EU-JAMRAI consortium. So we will alternate session where work package leader and task leader from JAMRAI will present work, and session where stakeholders will present their work. So the idea is to have a lively platform to connect and change and share through those Tuesday Connects. So this is it from my side, and I will now let the floor to Christine, who will present what EU-JAMRAI is doing on access. And thank you, Christine, for presenting today.
Thank you so much for the invitation. And thanks so much for so many people showing up. I'm honored. It's snowing here in the beautiful north of Norway, and there's a snowplow going past me right now. So I hope that you don't have any problems hearing me. Okay, so everyone can see my slides okay?
Yes.
Great. So we're going to talk today about access, why sustainable access is important to hinder antibiotic resistance. I'm presenting on behalf of my team. We have the leadership here is listed, including Johan. So we're all responsible for the content of this presentation. Let's see. So the first thing I think we can do is we can look back to 2024 and say that a lot happened with antimicrobial resistance in 2024, and they really set the scene about what we should be focusing on. So if we look at the UN 2024 political commitments, we see that access is right in the center of it. So one of the commitments is to ensure by 2030 that the use of the WHO access group of antibiotics, that consumption of that access group is at least 70% of overall human consumption. So in order to consume 70% of that access group, we have to have them available in countries. If we look at the veterinary side, one of the commitments was to invest in the animal health systems to support equitable access to essential veterinary services, improve animal health and appropriate management practices to prevent infections, and to promote the timely supply and quality of affordable, essential veterinary medicines, vaccines, and diagnostics. We know also that the EU was a little bit faster, and in 2023, agreed on the target that at least 65% of the total consumption of antibiotics in humans belongs to the access group of antibiotics. So in order to ensure that countries are utilizing access antibiotics, we want to make sure they're available. Because antibiotic guidelines often include only antibiotics available in the country. So if you look at typical processes to develop antibiotic prescribing guidelines, they're based not only on the evidence, what's the best evidence to determine which antibiotic should treat that infection, but they're also based upon which antibiotics are marketed in that country. So the available antibiotics determine the guidelines, the prescribing guidelines hopefully determine the prescriptions, which determine the sales and the economics. And if the economics are not as good as companies would like, then they might be removed from the market, and therefore they'd be removed from the guidelines. And this, of course, is to the detriment of narrow spectrum antibiotics that often have a smaller market share. So what this can mean is that narrow spectrum antibiotics aren't included in prescribing guidelines, and that's definitely not what we want. Where they're effective, we want to use narrow spectrum antibiotics. So when they're not available, let's look at a little bit of evidence to see what happens. So this nice study was published about a month ago. And it's looking at 7 pediatric hospitals in the 2022 amoxicillin shortage in the US, which resulted in a decline of amoxicillin prescribing by 31%. So amoxicillin, of course, is an access antibiotic. And what happened in this study in the US and probably many other countries during the same shortage, that there was increases in the use of alternative broader spectrum antibiotics, including amoxicillin clavulanic acid, azithromycin, ceftonir, and cephalexin. Now, for those of you who haven't memorized the WHO aware list, azithromycin and ceftonir, those are both watch antibiotics. Those are not antibiotics we want to increase the consumption of. So in order to reduce these shortages, we need to look at interventions. And this is a nice study that was commissioned by the European Commission. It was published back in December 2021, where they looked at shortages of all medicines, not just antibiotics, but all medicines, generic and non-generic medicines. And what you have here is you've got the total shortage duration, so how long the shortage lasted, and the number of reporting. And if you look at this, you see that almost all shortages are resolved quite quickly within the first 25 days or so. And so one intervention that many countries have implemented is stockpiling in order to have a stockpile, a revolving stockpile, so that they can manage these short-term fluctuations in stock, because manufacturing problems can happen, distribution problems can happen, and this is one potentially effective for intervention for short-term shortages. But when you look at this long tail here, this is there's many diverse reasons for these shortages. And therefore, there's not one intervention that's going to solve these shortages, this long tail of many, many different things. It could be production problems, could be increases in demand, it could be distribution problems. There are many complex issues here. So for example, another very nice study was published about a month ago. And if you haven't read this and you're interested in the topic of access, which you're all here, so I'm glad that you're all here because that means you are interested, I would highly recommend that you read this article. And it's got a nice title, A Pharmaceutical Policy Accident, Collision of Shareholder Capitalism and Chinese State Capitalism Driving the Shortage of an Essential Antibiotic. And what this study does is it takes an in-depth look at the shortage of piperacillin tazobactam, hospital antibiotic that experienced global shortages on and off in between 2013 to 2020. And generally, when you hear about this shortage, you think of one thing. You think of a factory explosion at a Chinese factory producing the active pharmaceutical ingredient, which has been highly publicized. But what this article does very nicely is it shows the complexity actually around this global shortage. It showed that there was increased demand when the antibiotic went from patented to generic, and that was across 8 different suppliers. 8 suppliers, including European suppliers and non-European suppliers. There were company mergers, including large multinational companies and consolidation. When the product went from patented to generic, it faced mandatory price reductions. And so therefore, there was a need to have more cost-effective products. And that resulted in company mergers and consolidations. They looked at upgrades in manufacturing facilities due to the increased demand, but there was delays in those processes. There was an unlucky occurrence of an inspection failure, non-compliance with the GMP, and these are all at different factories. And then there was cost cutting resulting in plant closures. And then in the end, there was an explosion, unfortunately, at a active pharmaceutical ingredient in a factory in China. So I think this article, it really gives I mean, obviously this is perhaps an exceptional shortage because it had such global impact, and there were so many things that impacted this shortage, but it really does give a great insight into the complexity of shortages and having a reliable supply of these medicines. So in Work Package 9, here at JAMRAI, we have Work Package 9, which is dedicated to access. And the main thing that we are trying to do in Work Package 9 is we're trying to make concrete progress to strengthen access to specific antibiotics, both for human and veterinary use, and veterinary vaccines, both nationally and at the European level. So on January 1st, 2028, when JAMRAI is officially over, we hope to be able to say that Work Package 9 has contributed to strengthen the access of these specific antibiotics in these specific countries. That's our aim. We are trying to be ambitious, and I'll walk you through how we're doing that. But the second aim that we have is that we want the countries that are working with us, all of our colleagues, to develop and establish strong collaboration within and between national and regional stakeholders working on access to antibiotics. Because one of the very first things that we found after starting this process a year ago was that in many countries, communication networks were not available. People didn't know who to talk to at regulators or procurement experts or clinicians or veterinarians. So there was not an operative network where people could work together, collaborate on a national basis. And really increasing and improving access to these antibiotics, it's complicated. So we need to have these national networks, and we need to work together because we all have different competencies. So what are we doing? So firstly, I'll take you through what we're doing at a high level, and I'll go into each step after that. So first, of course, we want to base everything on evidence. So the first step is evidence. Then we're identifying which antibiotics and veterinary vaccines we're working on, understanding the sources of unstable availability, and then looking at interventions. So on the evidence, we're very fortunate to our Belgium colleagues because they kicked us off very well. We had our first kickoff meeting in February 2024. You can see the picture here, where we had a review of the current evidence. So we try to make evidence a central part of what we're doing. So we have monthly webinars, generally focused on a topic to provide evidence. So for example, in September, we had the Netherlands presented individual dispensing of antibiotics in the Netherlands. We've had industry come and present demand forecasting. So these are regular webinars that we have to share ongoing evidence. So if you're interested in these, let us know. You're most welcome to attend. We also record all of these webinars, so you can go to our webpage and you can watch it at your convenience. So what are we doing in Work Package 9? So first, we're looking at the evidence, and the second thing that we're doing is to identify which products we want to focus on. We don't want to focus on every single antibiotic. You know, we've seen the WHO or the UN declaration and the EU goals. And so what we want to do is we've asked every participating country working in the work package to focus on, to select products that are clinically important, both human and veterinary, and also have a vulnerable supply chain. So either that means that they've been in shortage, often in shortage, they've been withdrawn from the market, or they've never been launched in the market. Let's see here. So So what we try to do in Work Package 9 is we always, when we ask our colleagues to do something, we try to create a short methodology. So we write up a short methodology talking about what we're doing, why we're doing it, answering any questions about how to do it, and make that available and talk to people. So if you go to our website, you will see that for all of the countries participating in Work Package 9, which are the lighter color here, you can click on them and you can see the antibiotics and veterinary vaccines that they have selected. Now, I mentioned veterinary vaccines because we included veterinary vaccines because otherwise antibiotics would be used if the vaccine was not available. So the next step is to understand why do these products have vulnerable supply? And so what we've done here is we've mapped firstly the focus products that have been selected in about 10 of the larger markets to find out where are these products available, what strengths they're available in, what formulations, and really understand a little bit more about the market. And then we've asked each country to perform what is called a barrier analysis. So to look for their national context at the specific products to understand why are these products have vulnerable supply. Because it can be many different things. It can be national barriers. There can be problems European-wide or global. So we need to understand the barriers if we're going to create effective interventions. So we're about to finish the barrier analysis and then start on the interventions. And we've moved through all of this fairly quickly. So we will have identified and mapped the barriers in just a little over 1 year of the joint action, because we want to spend most of the 3 remaining years working on interventions, designing them, testing them, and giving feedback. So interventions can be many, many different things. It depends upon the barriers for the antibiotic and the context. So what we're starting this spring is to look at the interventions and what are the realistic tailored interventions that could strengthen access. Could it be joint procurement? Could it be product harmonization, revenue guarantee? Could it be e-leaflets, multilingual packaging? What can we do to make the market more attractive for industry and to make it more reliable for the patients? So in order to come up with these interventions, we talk with national stakeholders. That was the second goal of Work Package 9, is to make sure that we have that strong linkages to national stakeholders. We discuss internally in Work Package 9 because we have a wealth of expertise within the Work Package itself. We jointly examine the evidence. We collaborate with each other. We're there to help out each other and work together. Interventions can be national, multinational, regional, or European, and we work with industry. It's important that we talk to industry, understand their perspective, understand what are their perceived barriers, and try to develop interventions, obviously, that remedy these barriers. And then what we're trying to do is achieve national buy-in and implement these interventions. So that is the main bulk of the work that we're doing in Work Package 9. But we are also looking at innovation. So a smaller part of the work package is innovation. And we've done 2 main things in the first year of JAMRAI. The first is looking at bacteriophages. We have had a particular focus on looking at the regulation of bacteriophages, and we were very happy that we had a kickoff meeting, again, thanks to the Belgian sustainable implementation of human phage therapy across the EU. Now, we followed this up by performing a survey on the regulation of bacteriophages. We're collaborating with the University of Toronto in Canada in order to perform a global survey to try to understand where are regulators with the approval of bacteriophages, both for human and veterinary and sometimes environmental use. we want to understand what are the barriers, what's the knowledge, what are the pathways, what types of interventions are being tried, so that we can share this knowledge, because bacteriophages are a potentially viable alternative or complement to antibiotics, and one that's getting increasingly more attention. We're also very happy that we've been working with DG HERA on their revenue guarantee for new antibiotics. So we are here to assist DG HERA in accessing new antibiotics and old. We're also pleased to be working with them on their joint procurement initiative. And one thing that's coming soon, so you can watch this space, is the case of gonorrhea. So the world might be lucky enough to get 2 new antibiotics for gonorrhea in 2025. It looks quite promising. And so we want to start talking about, what does this mean? How might stewardship and access come together? And are there ways that the treatment and surveillance of gonorrhea should change in order to use these new tools more effectively? And we also have a very old antibiotic, spectinomycin, that's no longer available in Europe. So what we want to do is we will be having a webinar, hopefully in this spring, looking at the case of gonorrhea. So follow us for more on that. So one of the things that we've tried to do through Work Package 9 is to maintain momentum. And this started very well. Thank you again to our Belgian colleagues with our startup meeting in February last year. So we try to have face-to-face meetings. We will be having our next face-to-face meeting, where we'll be kicking off the intervention work in May in Copenhagen. We try to have monthly virtual meetings, often on an evidence-based topic, where we record them and they're made available for anyone in the public to watch. We also have the Work Package 9 leadership team. We have one-on-one virtual meetings with each participating country, where all actors in that country are invited. And these are meant to be open discussion forums to talk about expectations, answer any questions, hear about any troubles, and really try to be there to assist each other. So we're on our second round of one-on-one virtual meetings, and we find that this is a very effective tool to make sure that there's a greater understanding about what we're trying to do and to address any barriers and questions quite early. We try to have clear expectations. We always write a methodology document and try to make it short, concise, and as clear as possible. But we hope that we're also easy to give feedback about any changes in expectations, and we try to have very tangible outcomes. So this is what we're trying to do through Work Package 9. We're trying to improve access to the antibiotics that your countries have told us that they need strengthened access to. And we hope on January 1st, 2028, we can tell you that we've succeeded, at least in part. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christine. So now if you have questions for Christine, feel free to, raise your hand. And we already have 2 questions in the chat. So the first one is from Ulrika, asking which stakeholders with which influence are involved in the preparation of the stewardship preparation for the new gonorrhea product coming to the market.
Yeah, sorry for repeating myself, trying to write very quickly in the chat box. But yeah, I just felt like there might be like a global coordination needed here with this fantastic, opportunity, so that we don't lose anything.
Absolutely. It's there's still time. So if anyone is interested in participating in this work, you're most welcome. So it will be a webinar hosted by JAMRAI, but it'll be shared open to everyone in the public. And it's really, the main aim is not only to say, this is wonderful, we have 2 new great antibiotics. I mean, that's not every day that happens. That's great news. But also to say, how can we think about stewarding gonorrhea as well? instead of, as far as I understand it, our practice before is that, we get a new gonorrhea medicine and we use it until we have a certain amount of resistance, and then we find the next one. So, should this change with the advent of these new antibiotics? And it's hopefully meant to be, an early and very open brainstorming discussion about this.
Organizations, national and supranational actors, to do whatever they can. I mean, it will be a challenging situation anyway, because people might not behave as they should, but still, like, really trying to gather a united front here prior to this. But yeah, I shall look out for this webinar and try and follow. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you have feedback or input, please feel free to share.
Thank you. Then we have a question from Carlos from Portugal. So Carlos, if you want to step in, otherwise I can share your question.
It's just asking for some more information regarding these two specific antibiotics, which I find very important to have available all over Europe, and it's very difficult. Temocillin and pivmecillin. And I don't know if you discussed this too. If later you can share by mail or whatever, it would be very important for us.
Yes, absolutely. So these are both two antibiotics that have been our focus antibiotics, pivmecillin and temocillin. So we will be working on interventions for both of these. So some interventions, for example, pivmecillin, of course, was newly approved in the US last year as well. So with some interesting, potentially new evidence to look at. So one of the ideas with pivmecillin is that to make sure that European colleagues are aware of the new evidence for pivmecillin. So we're working on that. Temocillin is a lot of work has been done by France, has been leading the way on that. And so we are also looking at, the first thing we start with is evidence to let people know more about an antibiotic, temocillin, that maybe they don't know so much about, and build upon that. So absolutely, those are two products that we'll be working on. And if you ask me in a year, I can tell you a whole lot more about what we're doing, but those are the plans.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Christine, let's meet next year to share more results on that. Then we have a question from Edward. So Edward, just step in, or otherwise I will read your question.
Well, you can read the question. This is a really, really broad question, quite idealistic, but I think in the work you do, you have to think about what actually caused the problems, and you've given them yourself. It's actually how the industry works and everything else. And I wonder whether in your plans, in your work, in your advice, you should build in something that the EU should ideally preferably work with industries who have in their mission statement this service to public, which is it's a new upcoming very fringe movement which is happening, but I think it might be worth building that into the narrative a little bit. And I refer to the donut economy. If you all have a look, it's quite interesting. They explain how this can happen, how this should be done. So I wonder whether that should be built in, because if you're going to work with the system that has caused the problem, you have to try and find something outside the system as well. It's a complicated general question, but I think we have to think a bit further away as well. That's just my point. Thank you.
Thanks for pointing that out. I hadn't heard of it, so I will definitely have a look at it. But I think industry is our partner in this, in the fact that we are trying to work with them, and they're obviously doing their most, because they're interested in providing the products that they've marketed in each country. And it's the dynamics are always interesting. If you look, there's a lot of TB medicines, tuberculosis medicines that countries have chosen, and one of them is protaminid, which is a new patented TB medicine, which is very important. It was developed by TB Alliance. So 100% publicly financed TB medicine. but it's still expensive. And it's expensive because distributing and you know, there's a lot of aspects to making medicines available that actually do cost. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that you know, the European patients have access to the antibiotics that they need, but also trying to make sure that the companies are able to effectively provide them as well, that we're not creating barriers as well. So we're trying to I sit at the Institute of Public Health in Norway, so I'm not at the Medicines Agency, so I can sit somewhat in between and try to find work with solutions. And I think we're trying to be very neutral. But thank you. I would love to look at that. So if you could send that to me, I'd appreciate it.
I've put a link in the chat.
Thank you.
Thank you. Then we have a question from Diana. So Diana, if you want to step in, otherwise I will read your question. So the question of Diana is about whether we are aware of any diverting of API from animal medicine to human medicine in case of shortages. Amoxicillin, for instance.
That's a great question. And that's one area that we're going to be talking about amoxicillin and the shortages in Bilbao as well at the annual meeting. I don't know of diverting of API from amoxicillin, but I think it's a complicated area about who are the API providers for veterinary amoxicillin versus human amoxicillin. But we don't have an answer to that question yet, but we will be looking more into API production and potential interventions.
Thank you, Christine. We then have a question from Christine from EFPA. So I think I can read the question because Christine is asking how industry can contribute and give input to Work Package 9 work.
Thanks, Johan. And actually, I think, Christine, you've already given the answer. But so we're really happy to help here. These are obviously, as you said, you know, we're certainly interested in making our products available, and we have the products. We want to put them on the market. So we are also looking at solutions. It is a very complex issue, and there are multiple things to be looking at, you know, the demand side, the supply side, regulations, the markets. So we've already got some findings, and we'd be really more than happy to share that with you and work with you on this.
That would be great. We have been working, each country has been asked to contact their local generic industry, because most of the products are generic that they're focused on. So industry is a regular stakeholder that every country should be engaged in. But absolutely on the innovative side as well. So the gonorrhea webinar will definitely be, I'll be reaching out to you for that. And also we're really on the new innovative antibiotics. We're more of a source for HERA as a group of countries we're there to help HERA with their needs. But definitely, we can definitely talk. Thank you, Christine.
Then we have another question from Rose from Netherlands. So Rose, do you want to step in, or I can read your question? So the question from Rosemarine is, how are we going to make sure our intervention with industry is not just doing that job? So I'm not sure I understand well your question, Rose. Maybe you can step in.
Maybe she means that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I think the topic of industry has been addressed in different questions now. But what I mean is evaluating and optimizing your own process, of course, is also part of their tasks. And I was wondering how you see that, where is your objective? What can we do as JAMRAI researchers and policymakers, and where's the boundary there?
Yep, good question.
Also not an easy, small question.
And I think it's important to say that JAMRAI, we're not researchers in this instance. So joint actions aren't research. It's not about writing papers here. So that's what we're really actually trying to strengthen access in each of these countries. And so the idea is that we look at, for example, one of the products that 10 countries have selected is phenoxymethylpenicillin, penicillin V. So an antibiotic that was first launched in the 1950s, narrow spectrum penicillin that's widely used, especially across the Nordic countries. But phenoxymethylpenicillin is a very old antibiotic that, because it's so old, its attributes have changed. So there's a lot of different strengths that are being used across European countries. So even in the Scandinavian countries, we don't use the same strengths of phenoxymethylpenicillin. And that makes it very difficult for industry to create single batches of a product. Because what we use, we have low consumption. So having that low consumption, an annual consumption in Norway for the product might be smaller than the batch size. Strength, formulation, dosing, all of these things, we make it very difficult and costly to produce these. So what we're trying to do is illuminate what these barriers are and come up with interventions, but we have to sell our interventions. We have to sell them not only to our regulators, our procurement experts, nationally, to say that we think that this is a safe and potentially effective intervention that could be trialed. And we also have to get the companies on board, willingness to say, look, you've taken off the pediatric tablet of phenoxymethylpenicillin in Norway. Can you please bring it back, as long as, we agree to use the same strength and formulation as other countries with a similar dosing regime. So it's complex. We're kind of in uncharted territories here because we're trying to work across many actors. So we're taking a flexible approach, trying to talk openly and widely, and we're very open. So I think that's our approach. If we'll succeed or not, I'm not sure. But I think that we are already having somewhat of an impact. So we hope that we can continue.
Thank you, Christine. We need to wrap up, but I just would like to share a last question from Ari Sam from the Council of European Dentists, because I think it's an important one. How can we expand that work also in other smaller countries that are not part of the Europe? Because we are a European joint action, so of course our focus is in Europe. But can you give us more insight on how this work could be expanded outside Europe?
Well, we only have 14 out of the 30 JAMRAI countries that are participating in the Access Work Package. We're lucky that I think we have 2 new countries that have decided to join us, so that's wonderful. And every country is welcome to join us. So please, if you're interested, let us know. But what we're trying to do countries, when we get to interventions, to see if those non-participating countries also want to participate on specific regional or European interventions, or are just plain curious about the interventions that we're doing and think it might be useful nationally. But we're also, we try to document everything and share it. And at the end of the JAMRAI will hopefully not only have improved access to these specific antibiotics, but each country has been asked to write a report. And we've already started writing these country-specific reports. And it'll explain, hopefully in a fairly short, concise manner, why the products were selected, how they were selected, what the barriers analysis, how the barrier analysis was done, what the barriers that were identified, how the interventions were selected, and the implementation process, and potentially the outcomes or the challenges. So those reports will not only be sent to the national policymakers, because undoubtedly there'll still be work to be done at the end of JAMRAI, but they'll also be made publicly available. So any other country that wants to use that information, they'll be made available in English and with an executive summary in the local language. But any other country that wants to use that can learn from that. And we're also working with WHO Euro on tuberculosis medicines.
Thank you, Christine. So we will wrap up now because we intend to have short meeting, and we want you also to enjoy your lunch. So just a quick wrap up. So yeah, it was the first occurrence of this Tuesday Connect, so we hope you find it valuable, and we really want to create a space where we can exchange all together. And for that, we need your help to create a lively and active discussion forum. So thank you, Christine, for the really nice presentation, and for all of you to join today. We almost reached 200 people online, so during Christine's presentation, so it was great. So just a few reminders: make sure to register to our next annual meeting coming in a few months. So I will share the registration link, or one of my colleagues will share it in the chat. So make sure to register. Do not forget to register to our newsletter if you want more information about JAMRAI. And our next Tuesday Connect will be on February 18th. So the agenda will be shared in the beginning of February. And if you want to present, especially our external stakeholders, during one of those future Tuesday Connect, make sure to contact us at our secretariat email address. And I wish you all a nice lunch, and we thank you for your commitment in the fight against AMR.